Hey, how's everyone doing? And today is episode 119, and it's just so much is going on. I just want to let you know that currently I am going through a an online program, and in this online program, it's more like a community of people. We are all getting together, and we are talking about how we have been or how we are building this 1% 1 million or digital business. And it's interesting because you get to mingle around with people who are like-minded, as well as you get to ask questions, and in the process itself you also realize that, hey, many of the things that I struggle with or I'm not sure about, it's not just unique to me. Um, People like me are also facing some of these challenges, and I think what's more exciting is that it enabled me to connect with this group of people, and as a result of that, some of them were asking questions which I could help, particularly about LinkedIn. And so I have been just selflessly contributing to other people when they ask questions, and at the same time to really give encouragement to anyone who pose a win in their in in this community itself. So it's a great community, and at the same time, we are going through some of these courses that is going to help us, become better in terms of the way that we run our business itself. But one of the things that I notice is that I'm sure many of you during this pandemic, you would have in one way, shape, and form taken up some online courses. And typically, how most online courses are done, it's of course there are two broad categories. So one category is what you call synchronous, which means the training is happening at the same time as you are consuming it. So it's not very different from a traditional, um, it's not so different from a traditional training, a face-to-face training, because the instructor is there guiding you through that course itself. And so that is synchronous, right? And then of course you have asynchronous. Asynchronous means that the instructor would actually record a session or sessions, and these sessions are then put up into a learning management system. And on that learning management system itself, what you can do is you can literally just consume the content at your own pace, and if need be, to go back and review those lessons as many times as you want to. And both of them has got pros and cons. For example, with the synchronous training, it gives you the opportunity to ask questions in real time. It also gives you the opportunity to interact with your course mates, and at the same time go into a breakout room to be able to enable you to discuss ideas and brainstorm. So it's pretty much mimics an actual in-person training. It's just that it's done in a virtual format. Now, then of course you have that I think is a good thing about that. Now, what's not so good about synchronous training, especially when it's done in a at home in a computer, which the screen may not be what you would expect it to be, and so what's going to happen is you are going to run into the situation whereby you are constrained and be watching that screen for the next 6 hours, which can be really, really, um, you know, detrimental to your eyes, and you get tired, right? So I think that's the downside with the synchronous training. Now, the asynchronous type of training, the good part is, like, for people like me, sometimes I just need to revisit the content over and over again, and so I'm not, you know, um, I'm not confined to just, it's either you get it or you missed it, right? So that is the good part with the asynchronous. Of course, the downside with that is that, if you've got a question, you are not able to ask it real time, and so that requires you to really note your questions down, and to be able to ask those questions when you need to. And so those are some of the things. Now, as I'm going through the online course itself for myself, the online course in that community that I just told you about, it's all asynchronous type of training, right? The only thing that they kind of do live sessions are more of Q&As, and in those Q&As itself, essentially what you do is you really, that's fairly little participation, because what you actually do during the Q&A, it's you submit your questions, prior to the session itself, and then the instructor will go through the questions and it will answer. And of course, you get a chance to clarify, if your question is being answered, right? But other than that, it's still pretty much a one-way thing. And I think, for many of us, as I spoke about it yesterday, many of us, we buy a book, we don't complete it. And I would also add that many of us who buy an online course, especially when it's the format is asynchronous, and essentially what they want you to do is just to watch all these recorded videos one after another. When I took those type of programs, I just, I just didn't have the motivation and the desire to complete it. And I thought it was just me. So when I start asking around, I realized that many people also fall into that category. I'm not sure if you do that too. If you do, please drop a comment and let me know that, yeah, that's the same for you as well, right? And when I create my own online courses, I realize that, a good percentage of people, at least 20% of them, do not complete the course. And so when I follow up with them, there were various reasons. One, of course, is similar to what we spoke about. One, of course, is time. The other one, it's just not their priorities at this point in time. They bought it because they thought it was a great program and they wanted to have access to that because I gave them lifetime access. And some people were just buying it and not even getting started as well. And so the core idea behind that really is the following. There is something inherently wrong with the way online courses are being taught, right? Because people see this as like a dichotomy. Because for the longest time, we have been selling the idea to people that, hey, when you create an online course, which is true, but when you create an online course, you literally just have to create it once and you can sell it over and over again. Now, what that is true, that's only one aspect of it. And so if you're just thinking of, oh, I'm going to do an online course, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to record a series of videos maybe 50 videos, for example, like one of this online courses is just open up a couple of days back. The bragging right was that I have 50 videos to walk you through that. But the point is, I think we are not here for just content itself, but what we're here for is something more than that. And so I decided to dig deeper into what are some of the things that we could do. And I then realized that most of my online courses are a lot more these days, are a lot more engaging. And the reason why it's engaging is because I stuck to this framework. And this framework has been around since 1965, right? So it's been around for a long time. And what's so great about this framework is that, some of these frameworks, if I tell you that it's a framework that has been conceptualized like so long ago, you may think it's not relevant because the assumptions that they made at the point in time may be very, very different from the way that we learn right now. But when you look at this framework itself, what you then realize is the following. Robert Gagne did not formulate this framework based on how people learn. Robert Gagne created this framework based on how humans process information. Sure, back in those days when you talked about how we process information, some of the information may be a lot more static, whereas in today's context, where we talk about processing information, the information, the content, it's a lot more dynamic. And so while the actual content itself has to change, but the principles behind this framework still remains the same. All right. And so today I want to take the time to walk you through this framework because I think it will greatly benefit you, especially if you are thinking of not just creating an online course, but actually creating what I call a catalytic course. Right. And so here we go. Now, this framework, it's called Gagne's 9 events of instruction. Now, you need to take it a little out of context and you need to contextualize it to your world, right? So when I do this, when I train people in terms of podcasting, when I train people in terms of crafting videos, I use this framework, but I adapt it to the context and the medium itself. So you need to do a fair bit of contextualization. But today I just want to walk you through this framework and at the same time give you some examples. So the first one really is, if you take a look at this, the first step with any form of instruction, right? Any form of educational content, it has to be this. It has to gain the attention of your audience. Now, gaining attention of your audience, it's what many successful YouTubers do. Because arguably in the first 3 to 5 seconds, if you're not quite sure what this video is about, or you're not catching my attention, then really, I'm just going to scroll on. And so there are a few ways to capture people's attention. For example, if you're creating YouTube videos, for example, you could work on the thumbnail, you could work on the title of your video. That's definitely one way to capture people's attention, right? If you are writing an article, then obviously, it's that first headline that is going to capture people's attention. If you're writing a LinkedIn post, definitely the first line is what you want to get across, get their attention. Because once you earn their attention, the next thing you can do is then you can walk them through the process. And if you don't, then you would have already lost that. So that's step one. Now, step two, it's to be very clear, right? To inform the learners about the objective. So, the whole idea is that once you've gotten their attention, the next thing that you really want to do that is to share with them that this is what you're going to learn, right? This is what you're going to learn. And at the end of this video itself, you will have a framework. Like in this case, at the end of this video, you would have a framework to help you craft and create better educational content. And if that's what you want, then stay tuned, right? So inform the learners about the objective. Okay, and so that's something that you would have to take note as well. Now, once you've informed the learners about the objective, here's something that I feel that some people miss. And there are various ways to do this. This is tapping on prior learning. Now, of course, you need to understand that when Gagne created this, he was looking at, if you are the teacher, every lesson kind of builds upon the previous one. So what you want to do is you want to be able to tap on that prior learning, or if you are taking a group of students and you are not quite sure what's the foundation in terms of the concepts of this topic itself, this is where you can start asking them questions. And that gives you an idea of where they're at. That's one way of looking at it. Now, in our context here, what we really want to do is, once you know your audience very, very well, you are then able to connect with your audience by telling them something that they are familiar with, right? So in the case of this video, for example, I wanted to make that link between why you need a new way of, or a better way of designing your content. And so in order to do that, I have to bring about the pain point that you, as a learner, as a consumer of an online course, what you go through. And I'm sure for anyone who has purchased an online course will be able to relate to that. That's one example. Another example would be when before you kind of introduce your concept, you want to kind of get them to think about this is how they have been doing, right? Because you kind of heighten their awareness that what they're doing currently, it's probably not going to be sufficient. It's good, but if they want to take it to the next level, this is how they need to pay attention to, right? So tap on that prior learning to be able to get them to understand what's going on. And then once you have done that, then you present your content. Now, this is the part where you start presenting your new idea, right? So I do not jump straight into this video just talking about, Gagne's 9 events of instruction. Event number 1 is this. Event number 2 is this. Because there will not be a context, and besides, you probably, in your position as a course developer, you may not see that there is a problem with the current way of learning until you realize that, engagement is low, retention is low, and people are not motivated to complete those lessons itself. So once you have understand that, once you have realized that, then in the case for a better way of designing educational content becomes more apparent. And so this is where I start presenting the content. So you do not jump straight in. You kind of want to have that, setting the context, if you like, right? And so you need to understand, and this is where I think many online course facilitators or traders or instructor, whatever you want to call them, this is where many of them fail. And I say fail because they have that biasness in the sense that they think just because they understood the concept, they think that you should understand the concept as well when I explain it to you. Now, that is proven time and again for me to be not the case because I went through, you know, a decade of experience in building businesses, in guiding businesses, in consulting for businesses. I've gone through at least 5 years before being able to build multiple streams of income, leveraging technology, and building a business that it's able to support the lifestyle that I want. And to think that I'm able to shrink all this learning, of course, I could pick out all the failures, I could just give you what works. But to think that, anyone could condense this into a 40-hour or even a 50-hour program, and at the same time expecting the learner at the other end to be able to pick that up and implement it, I think that it's where most online courses fail. And so following Gagne's model, it's crucial at this part here. This is where you need to provide guidance. So the most obvious way or the simplest way that most people do when they provide guidance is they actually just give you a worksheet and they tell you, go figure. Now, that may be sufficient for some people, but I would say it would be grossly insufficient for most people because until and unless you are able to show them some examples and walk them through how you do it, it's going to be fairly conceptual and difficult for the learner who may not have direct access to you as a student. If they do not have direct access to you, then they are just going to understand the concept conceptually but not being able to implement that. So if you're thinking about what is that one thing I could do to increase the level of transference of learning so that my students are able to do what I do, then this is the part where you really need to provide the guidance. And I say provide the guidance here, it goes down to as plain as telling people step one, this is what you do, step two, this is what you do, step three, and on and on and on. Right? It really comes down to that because you cannot imagine that for someone who is building their landing page for the first time, even though it's a no-code tool, right? Someone who is building a landing page for the first time, they will know exactly what to do. Most of us wouldn't have a clue at all. And so this is where you really need to provide the guidance for them to implement or to put into practice what you have taught them. And of course, then this is where you need to give them time to practice. So this is where my training for a group of middle managers for two organizations in the last 2 months, this was exactly what we did. We presented the content to them, and then we provided guidance by breaking them out into smaller groups, and then we give them some homework to do, so that the next time when they come back to class itself, they actually would be able to demonstrate whether what they learn, are they able to apply that. And so you need to give them time to practice, and ideally this, depending on, of course, depending on the type of training you're talking about, but by and large, you will need to provide some time for them to practice either with your involvement or on their own. So if you're going to get them to do that practice on their own, then the providing guidance part needs to be very, very heavy, because otherwise, you cannot expect your learner to be able to put into practice what you have taught them. And this is the part where I think, again, online courses do not do enough of, and that is providing feedback. I mean, you will really need to collect back, the assignments, look through them, and kind of tell them like, hey, this is where um, it didn't work, and this is where you will need to do certain things, right? So sure, I mean, when you sell your online course, you may sell this as an additional bonus, right? An additional thing, an add-on, because this part, it's really going to be time consuming, and it depends on the learners itself. Sometimes the learners may need more time in terms, or more concrete steps in terms of what are the feedback that you need to give them. And then, of course, at the end of the day, you need to kind of assess where they are at. Now here it's where I will take it a little bit, you know differently, because in this context, when Gagnon talks about his 9 events of instruction, you need to understand that it's for a classroom setting. But in our real world here, I think assessment of performance, it's really up to individual. And when I say that, what I mean by it's this, I think we need to let the learners know that at the end of this module, you would have A, B, and C. And this is the kind of expectations that we would want you to be able to perform up to. And so, this is really like giving them the answers and having them evaluate and assess themselves. And of course, the more motivated ones will then identify where the gaps are and come back to you for feedback or for additional guidance. And so that's something that you can do. But in our context here, it's to do it in a way that it's sustainable for you as well, right? And of course, lastly, it's you want them to be able to, enhance their retention. And there are various ways to do this. One, of course, the best way to do enhancement of retention is actually to get them to teach someone else, right? And yes, I mean, on this show itself, the whole idea is talking about the mindset, skill set, tool set. But what I'd also like to emphasize here is, until you are teaching, and teaching is the best way to learn, right? Because in order to teach this to you, I have to learn it, and I have to be able to use specific examples and to illustrate it to you. And so the only way I could do this is I have to be able to understand it fully. And that's what essentially I've done. And so, the way forward for you to think about is, which aspect of it in your online course are you missing out, right? Which aspect of it are you missing out? We, over the course of the next few weeks, we're going to cover some of some of these elements in a greater detail, and that's going to be coming up in the coming weeks. But what I'd like you to think right now is that if you were to be the student of your own online course, which aspect of it would you want more of? And how does it fit into this framework itself? Right? I hope this has been helpful. And as always, if you got questions, feel free to ask me, whether it's in the comment. I read all the comments and I reply to all the comments. And if you have got questions, feel free to ask me. If you want to find out more about how you can get involved in this journey that I am embarking on, that I've embarked on, you could always go to my website, and that is Melvin, spelled with a Y, right? Melvin.me. Okay. And with that, thank you so much for watching. I hope it has been helpful. Let me know in the comments. So if it has been helpful, give me a thumbs up. If you want more of such content, make sure you subscribe on YouTube or follow me on Facebook. And with that, I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye bye.